So I want to just address anger really quick, because I think that we can kind of see in our current social political climate that anger and hostility seems to be prevalent. And I will say from my own experience and trauma training that a lot of times when you've been through something very like abusive or even emotional neglect, anything like that, if you've been on the wrong side of anger, irrational anger usually is an irrational anger. If somebody's taking anger out on someone else and you don't really have a rhyme or reason other than control or the abuser's fears being projected onto the person, or their own trauma or pain, sorry, I'm eating my hairs, then usually, I won't say usually because I don't know that for a fact, but I will say it is not uncommon for people like myself who fear anger later on in life when they're not in that situation anymore, because they somewhat attribute that emotion with what they had happen to them. And even in your logical brain, you might know better. Look at, I'm obsessing about my hair. Ignore my neurodivergent twitches. They know better, but it still makes you hesitant. It's like your nervous system has a brain of its own, and it recognizes anger as something to be afraid of, right? So I remember when I finally found my anger, but it was that healthy wrath. Gnostics call it wrath, a just anger. Where, because even if you look at the Bible, God gets angry. And yes, in the Hebrew scriptures, it's a little out of control. But it's not like that in the Greek scriptures, when it's Jesus's time on earth. That anger that's demonstrated, like him throwing the tables in the temples, using the house of worship for monetary means, is what made him angry, because it was a just anger, because there was a form of exploitation, abuse, whatever you want to call it, happening. And that is what he came to earth to, in the biblical sense, to stand up against people that would do that. So I just think that it's probably a good time in our timeline to think about the things that make you angry, and if you are using that anger in a just way that would help the greater good. Like when I really applied my anger, I was saving myself and my son, essentially, and everybody in our little world, so that nothing any worse could happen than already had, because things at some point are just going to escalate, and they're just going to get worse until you put your foot down and you have that centered anger where you can see, you have laser focus, you know exactly what needs to be done. You just have to get that gumption in you, that moxie to do it. You can think clearly, everything is precise, and you are channeling that anger. And I think that's what's important, is when you can channel the anger. Because right now, I feel like culture and society in general, not just in America, but everywhere, is kind of getting spews of irrational anger just all over them, because of insecurities, the unhealed traumas and abuses and insecurities. And, there was a dragonfly just flew over me, which is rare in the middle of the desert. But anyway, squirrel. I think that when you're on the receiving end of that, and you are a love and light kind of a person, remember that the imbalance of anger and joy are both equally unhealthy, because an imbalance of joy is when you're using, you're disassociating and you're doing, everything's love and light all the time. And that disassociating is kind of how we get to places like we're in now. because we're not acknowledging the darkness. You have to find the right balance of acknowledging the darkness and the unhealthy aspects and components that are happening in our lives and how they're influencing us in unhealthy ways so that we can do something for the greater good. So ponder that. Ponder what you can do with your wrath in a healthy, constructive way. And know that when you're doing it in the right way and it's applied in the right way, you feel calm, you feel centered, you don't feel like a victim at all anymore. All of a sudden you are in your own power. And that is what the people in power that are afraid of. They're afraid of us feeling centered, united, and working as a collective towards a greater good because we're tired of being pushed around. So anyway, that's just an example, but you can use it in any part of your life, really. So here's to healthy wrath for the just and the greatest good of all.